Hi, welcome to a very good afternoon. Myself, Abdul Sattar, and today we will be looking into an important concept regarding the transport of gases in the human body. Now, basically, today we will be trying to understand what all gases get transported and what is the mechanism behind their transportation, and as well as the criteria or the factors influencing the transport of these gases. So, without awaiting any further, let us start. Now, so basically, these are the contents that we will be looking into in today's session, where we will be understanding that the gases that are being transported inside the body, chief gases are oxygen and carbon dioxide, and what is the mechanism of diffusion for pulmonary exchange, systemic exchange, and apart from this, we will also be looking into transport of oxygen, transport of carbon dioxide, and then the ultimate conclusion of the session. Now, coming to mechanism of diffusion, this is exclusively a passive phenomenon, which means there is no expense of energy at all. No energy is required. And this is a key thing regarding this. Now, when this is a passive phenomenon, then it means that these gases are transported on the basis of their partial pressures. Now, what is the partial pressure? Partial pressure is the amount of pressure exerted by a gas on the other gases when they are present in a mixture. When the gases are present in the form of a mixture, that is, be it any system, be it biotic system, be it abiotic system, there will be plentiful of gases, and they will be having their own pressure gradients where their molecules will be interacting and colliding with each other. So ultimately, partial pressure of gases is the amount of pressure exerted by molecules of one gas on the molecules of other gas in a given system. Coming to partial pressure, so PO2 indicates the partial pressure of oxygen, while the PCO2 indicates the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Now, we need to keep in mind one more thing here, that is diffusion, the mechanism of diffusion. Now, what is the general principle of diffusion? The things from their higher concentrations will diffuse to their lower concentrations, and generally the things that are getting diffused from one place to another place are gases. So, when we look into the partial pressure of oxygen inside our body, it is at different levels at different points of our body. The partial pressure varies from one region to another. For example, in the alveolar air, that is the alveoli that are there, inside the alveolar, the partial pressure for oxygen is 104 mmHg, and this is of oxygen. And at the same time, it is somewhere around 95 mmHg in oxygenated blood, and deoxygenated blood is 40 mmHg. Now, what is happening here? Alveoli is receiving deoxygenated blood, and this deoxygenated blood contains PO2 of 40 mmHg. That is partial pressure of oxygen in the deoxygenated blood is somewhere around 40 mmHg. Alveoli, we know, is a highly vascularized organ, and it is responsible for gaseous exchange inside our body. So, as soon as we can see the difference between the pressure gradient here, 104 mm Hg in alveoli and 40 mm Hg in the deoxygenated blood. So, what happens is this oxygen diffuses from the alveoli into the blood, ultimately transforming it into the oxygenated blood. And this oxygenated blood attains a partial pressure of 95 mm Hg. So, as I told you earlier, diffusion is a phenomenon where the gases from their region of higher concentration diffuse to the region of their lower concentration. Moving on forward, same is the scenario with the carbon dioxide. So, the carbon dioxide concentration is somewhere around 40 mmHg in the alveolar air. I represent it with a different sort. So, the alveolar air, it is somewhere around 40 mmHg. This is what PCO2 means, partial pressure of carbon dioxide. And if we look here, the deoxygenated blood contains an partial pressure of 46 mmHg for carbon dioxide. So ultimately, the carbon dioxide will be diffusing from the deoxygenated blood into the alveolar air. So this is how the oxygen as well as carbon dioxide are getting transported or getting diffused inside our body at two basic levels. This is one is the pulmonary level where it is getting exchanged with the alveoli and the blood. The other one is the systemic level where the exchange will be occurring between the blood vessels and the tissues. Now, moving on forward, let us look into the transport of oxygen in detail. Now, coming to transport of oxygen, basically oxygen is transported into two main forms inside our body, out of which the first one happens to be form associated with hemoglobin, termed as oxyhemoglobin, and this is the major form where 97 to 99% of oxygen is transported. Now, how is this oxyhemoglobin attained? We all know our blood, that is RBCs, contain hemoglobin. I'll just write short for hemoglobin, that is H. And hemoglobin is a molecule that is made up of two basic units, that is the heme part or the iron part, which is made up of ferrous ions, and then there is the globin part or the protein part. Now, what happens here? We are concentrating on this heme part for our transport of oxygen. Now, this heme part or the ferrous part basically is made up of a porphyrin ring. Porphyrin ring is a complex ring of 4 pyrrole molecules, and each of these pyrrole molecules contain one Fe2 plus ion, that is ferrous ions. Now, what is happening here? If I want to illustrate this with the help of a diagram, let us say this is I just take this off. Yeah. Let us say that this is a porphyrin ring and it is containing 4 pyrrole rings structures, and these pyrrole ring structures are containing Fe plus Fe2 plus ion at the terminal position. Now, what happens is each of this Fe2 plus is capable of binding with one oxygen molecule. So that gives us in total 4 oxygen molecules that can be transported by one hemoglobin molecule. So what did I just say? I said that one hemoglobin molecule can transfer 4 molecules of oxygen. Now this thing you have to keep in mind. Moving on a little bit further, here I've written over it, that is 1 molecule of which we can bind to 4 oxygen molecules. Whereas 1 gram of hemoglobin can transport somewhere around 1.34 ml of milliliters of oxygen. These are the things that we are supposed to remember, because there could be a possible question on the basis of this part. So this is the major form, that is oxyhemoglobin, which is formed by the combination of oxygen with the heme part of the hemoglobin molecule. And let me tell you this thing, that this oxyhemoglobin is a short-lived complex. It is a temporary and short-lived in nature, means it can be dissolved very easily. Moving on to the second form of transport of oxygen, that is in the form of dissolved oxygen in the plasma, and this is in very trace quantities, that is 1 to 3% in the higher organisms. But in the lower organisms, where they cannot afford high metabolic expenses, the primary form of transport is in the form of dissolved plasma. So far we have learnt about transport of oxygen. Now let us move on to transport of carbon dioxide. But before that, let us take up the factors that are favoring the transport of hemoglobin or oxyhemoglobin. Basically, for oxyhemoglobin to be formed, we need certain conditions, that is the environment or the system must be having a high concentration of partial pressure of oxygen, that is high PO2, low PCO2, then low concentration of hydrogen ions, and ultimately there should be appropriate inbuilt temperatures or lower temperatures. And this is one more important phenomenon, that is oxygen dissociation curve. So we can plot a curve keeping in mind the dissociation, that is the partial pressure of oxygen on the x-axis and the percentage of dissociation on the y-axis. So if this curve is plotted, then this gives us a sigmoid curve, and this can be altered at different levels depending on these factors and different points in our body. Then moving on, I told you we could face a question that can appear from the oxygen part. So see, this is a simple and straightforward question, but slightly tricky, because we need to have some sort of background knowledge for this. So what is being asked here is, if 100 ml of blood carries 15 gram of hemoglobin, then what will be the amount of oxygen transported? For this we need to have this knowledge of transport, that is 1 gram of hemoglobin can transport somewhere around 1.34 ml of oxygen. So the calculation is mere simple one. So we have been given 15 grams of hemoglobin. We will simply multiply 15 into 1.34, that is the capacity of each gram of hemoglobin, and that would yield us somewhere around 19.8 ml, or if I round it off, then it will make it to 20 ml of oxygen can be transported. So this kind of questions we can expect in our competitive examinations, and they hardly take 15 to 20 seconds to solve. Then coming to the transport of carbon dioxide, as I've told you, carbon dioxide is basically transformed into 3 different forms. First one is in the form of carbonic acid, where only about 7% is carbon. I'll let you know why I've mentioned this first, the 7% concentration. Then I've mentioned about the 70% concentration. So let me know what is the reason behind it. So, carbonic acid is formed whenever carbon dioxide reacts with water molecules inside the RBC cells, that is red blood corpuscles, and it gives rise to formation of carbonic acid. And this reaction takes place in presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. This takes place in presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. And all of this reaction is taking place inside the RBC. Then second form, that is transport in the form of bicarbonates of sodium and potassium, that is the major one, somewhere around 70%. One thing that is there is, I just mentioned here, the membrane of the RBC is having a particular lining called as Dollond's membrane, and this membrane is impermeable to the sodium and potassium ions. That is why they cannot diffuse into RBC, whereas our preliminary product, that is the carbonic acid, is being formed inside the RBC. So, in order for the carbon dioxide to transform into bicarbonates of sodium and potassium, the carbonic acid needs to be expelled out of the RBC membrane, and that is what is exactly happening here. So, this carbonic acid, further in presence of carbonic anhydrates, produces the bicarbonates and liberation of H plus ions. And this is all again taking place in presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. And this bicarbonates, they ultimately diffuse out of the RBC and form the respective bicarbonates, that is sodium bicarbonate and potassium bicarbonate. And coming to the last form of the transport of the carbon dioxide as the carb-aminohemoglobin, and this is around 23%. So, carb-aminohemoglobin is formed when the carbon dioxide combines with amine group of hemoglobin. It combines with amine group of hemoglobin forming a carb-aminohemoglobin. But then there is one more competitor to this, that is carbon monoxide, which is found in quite good amounts in the atmosphere. Now, if at all there is association of carbon monoxide with hemoglobin molecule, this will give rise to carboxyhemoglobin, which is a permanent complex and is 200 times more favorable than that of the carbon dioxide and carb-aminohemoglobin. Now, as this is there, once the hemoglobin that is getting combined with the carbon monoxide, all of that hemoglobin is getting wasted. So, this could lead to a condition called as carbon poisoning, carbon monoxide poisoning, that could be a cause for death as well. Then moving on to the factors that are affecting the dissociation or transport of carbon dioxide, we have low PO2 concentration, high PCO2 concentration, higher concentration of H plus ions, and higher temperature. So all of these factors favor in the dissociation of carbon dioxide inside the human body. Coming to the one last part of the today's session, that is a regulation of respiration. Basically, the regulation of respiration is done in the neural center, and we have basically a specialized region inside the brain that goes by the name respiratory rhythm center. Now, this respiratory rhythm center can further be classified into three more small parts, that is expiratory center and pneumotaxic center. Now, all of the normal process in the sense both inhalation and exhalation are carried out by the inspiratory center itself. Just like the tidal volume, this inspiratory center is responsible for both inhalation as well as expiration or inspiration and expiration at the normal resting state. At the resting state, whenever an individual is at rest, and each cycle here takes somewhere around 5 seconds of time. It takes somewhere around 5 seconds of time. So a normal resting person respires or breathes somewhere around 12 to 13 times in a minute. Moving on to the expiratory center. Expiratory center comes into play whenever there is a forceful exhalation, and this is located in the medullary region of the brain, that is the hindbrain medulla part. Now, forceful exhalation in the sense, let us imagine a scenario where we are blowing balloons. At such times where extra amount of air needs to be expelled out of the lungs, this center can be responsive, that is expiratory center. Then coming to the pneumotaxic center. Pneumotaxic center is located in the pons part of the hindbrain, and this is active during excessive breathing. Let us say someone is performing some sort of physical activity, athletics, and they need to breathe faster. At certain times, the activity of pneumotaxic center can be done. And what happens as a result of this? The breaths become shallower. Shallower breaths, and apart from that, the number of breaths that goes up by many folds. And this number of breaths can be more in case of professional athletes when compared to normal individuals. Moving on to the conclusion for the day. So we understood that oxygen is transported as an oxyhemoglobin complex, which is temporary as well as short-lived complex. The factors that are responsible for transport of oxygen are high PO2, low PCO2, lesser H+ion concentration help in transport of oxygen. Coming to the diffusion or transport of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonates and carbamine hemoglobin. Bicarbonate